Welcome back everybody to another video from scriptingisfun.com. In this video we're going to look at how to do an enemy attack in a platform style game. In the video that we did on enemy AI ranged attacking, we were doing that in a top-down type of a game. So we're going to talk about how can we apply that to a platform style game in this video. So here's my orc enemy that I set up. You'll recognize him from the patrolling video that I did on how to make patrol happen in a platform style game correctly. So this time what we want him to do is we want him to be able to attack the player. And what he's going to do is he's going to throw a little axe here. I've got this axe that's going to be his projectile. So in his script, in the orc AI script, which is a copy of the spider script that we modified in the patrolling video, we're going to make sure that he has this axe as his projectile, and we will give him this raycast point. He should have a raycast point on him. It's right here. Let's check to see where that's positioned because we want to get that in the right spot. So we want to make sure it's outside of his collider, and maybe we'll kind of drop it down a little bit so that he's shooting more from shoulder length there. I think we're outside of the collider there now. So that's a good spot for his raycast point there. And then let's just go ahead and drag that into this. Whoops, hang on. Cancel. Alright. And then let's go ahead and drag that into the raycast point here in his script, like that. Alright, so we've got that adjusted. We'll have to give him some variables here, like an attack range. Maybe we'll make it like a 5, and we'll just kind of play around with this a little bit and see what we're going to do. We'll do an attack delay of 1. We're going to need, this is called web force because before we were throwing webs. This time we're going to be throwing this axe, so let's just give some sort of a web force here. I don't think I need to set anything up in here yet to make that work. So let's see what happens when we just play it with kind of the default spider AI kind of script in place. So let me bring my guy over here. Whoops, let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of that thing there. Okay, let's see if we can get close enough. Oh, okay, so you notice, okay, here you go. So he is getting an attack range, and he's trying to shoot at me, and it looks kind of crazy here. He's throwing these axes, he's bouncing on his head. So we got some work to do here to modify this from the spider script. So let's go back into our script here, and we're in the orc AI script, and let's find the one for attacking. Okay, so we've got our attack. And what we're doing here is, in the top-down version, we wanted the spider to rotate to face him, and then do the raycast to see if he had line of sight, and then go ahead and shoot the projectile. In this case, we don't want to rotate. Okay, just like in the patrolling one, we're going to get rid of all these 3 lines here on rotation. We're not going to rotate our player. Okay. We are going to check to see if we have our attack delay in place. We are going to raycast. This time though, we don't want to raycast on the y-axis. Up was on the positive y-axis of our spider. In this case, we want to raycast along the red X line. So this would actually be right, the positive X direction of our player. So let's see what happens if we put that in there, if we put right in here. Alright, so we'd say transform.right, and then we can use attack range. So now it should be raycasting along that position. If we hit the target, we'll go ahead and instantiate that axe. It's called new web here, which is fine. And then we'll go ahead and add some force to it and update our last attack time. So let's just see what that change happens to do in our game. So we'll go back into Unity. Let's see if he can actually attack him. Let's come over here and let's destroy this crate that's in my way, and let's get within 5 units and see if he can actually see me. Okay, so it doesn't look like he's seeing me yet, and I bet you some of you might understand why. Now if you look here, the way that we are turning him so that he is facing the right direction right now from the other video is that we are flipping his scale. But when we flip his scale, notice here that this red arrow for the X is always pointing to the right. So he's always raycasting this way. He's not raycasting in the direction he's actually facing. So if I was to jump over him here and get to the other side of him, you notice now how he's actually throwing axes to me, and we're not making those axes disappear, and those axes are flying off in a weird direction. It's not acting quite the way we want it to. As a matter of fact, we might be putting force in the wrong direction on the axes. I think we're pushing them up instead of to the side. So we'll have to take a look at that too. But he's only seeing me if I get to the right side of him in the world coordinates. So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to need to play around with this a little bit to see if we have the right things here. So transform.right didn't really work. That just says whichever way the transform is currently facing. So we're going to look and see how we can best fix this problem. Okay, so what we need to do here is make sure that when he changes direction, he also switches the direction of his right-facing X coordinates so that we can shoot this in the right direction. But maybe so that the raycast will actually work out. So let's try rotating him instead of flipping him. Right now what we're doing is we're flipping him directions by changing his scale on the X between a -1 and a +1 so that he flips back and forth like this. Instead of that, if we go and we rotate him around the Y 180 degrees, you'll notice if I rotate him that the X coordinate changes as well. So let's see if we can figure out how to rotate him on the y-axis from between 0 degrees and 180 degrees. So we'll go back into the script here. So that is actually happening in the patrolling area. Here's my patrol function in that orc AI script. And here we were doing it with scale. But instead of doing scale, let's see if we can set ourselves a brand new rotation instead. So I'm going to delete out these guys here, and if we are facing to the left or moving to the left, we want to face to the left. So let's see if we can build ourselves a new rotation. So let's make a quaternion, which is how Unity does rotations, and let's call this new rotation. And actually let's do that up here. We'll replace our vector 3 new scale with a new rotation, a quaternion. Then we'll say new rotation equals quaternion dot Euler. That will allow us to return a rotation, okay? And we can give it a vector 3 in Euler degrees, which is good because we think in degrees. Euler angles is Euler degrees. So what I want it to be is 0 on the X. I want it to be 180 on the Y and 0 on the Z axis. And then what we'll do is we will just apply that. So then we'll say transform, the transform of our orc here, dot rotation equals new rotation, which is a quaternion. So we make a quaternion, we fill it with a quaternion that has been filled in with angles the way we think of it, so it generates a quaternion and fills it here, and then we set it. And then again, if we copy these two lines and we paste them in, and then we just change this back to 0, 0, 0 for rotation, that should apply it the other way. So let's just see what happens if this actually works the way we expect it to. Alright, here we go. Now, you'll notice that he turned direction. Let me show that to you again here. But when he went to flip the other way, he turned it, but he kept moving to the right. And that's because when we are moving him here, we're saying transform.translate vector3 right. This is happening in the world coordinate system. Vector3 right is always going to be to the right in our world coordinates. We actually want to change this. Okay, so after some playing around here, I've kind of figured out how to do this. It didn't do quite what I thought it would the first time I tried it. So same thing though, we're making our new rotation here, we're setting it, and then we're doing a transform.right, which says move along the right transform of my player. We're setting it space equals space.self for the local coordinates. But if you wanted to move left, you're just going to make this a negative transform.right. And if you want him to actually move right, like we do in this case, we'll just say transform.right. And this actually gets him facing and moving in the right direction. So now let's see what happens if we walk up in his attack range, and let's see if he can detect us when we're on either side of him. So, oops, I guess I got to destroy this crate to get it out of the way. Alright, so let's see if we get close enough. Okay, so you notice now he is detecting us. He's throwing his axis straight up in the air because we haven't fixed that yet. But he can see us if we're on this side of him, and if we go over here on this side of him, he can also see us. So the raycast is now shooting in the correct directions. So let's fix that axe. What's happening here is when let's go back down to the attack part here. He's instantiating and he's adding a relative force. He's adding it on the y-axis here. So what we're going to want to do is actually just switch these two around. So we'll say web force on the x-axis, comma 0 on the y-axis. So he throws it on the x-axis instead of the y-axis. Now we're still going to need to do some tweaking here. This will get us a little closer, but you'll see what happens here now when I come up here and he starts throwing things at me. You notice that he threw an axe, but the axe actually is blocking our line of sight here now. But the axe actually tried to move to the right, and they actually kind of ended up colliding with each other because they both had colliders. So he's still only throwing it to the right and not to the left. So what we're going to need to do here is we're going to have to know which way we're currently facing. Alright, are we facing left or are we facing right? Because if we're facing right, we want to throw it with a positive force. If we're facing left, we want to throw it with a negative force. So we're going to have to just keep track of that. So let's make a variable at the top that keeps track of if we're facing left or right. So this can just be a private variable. We don't need to see this out in the inspector. It's a Boolean, so a private bool, and we'll just call this right. Okay, and if right is true, then we're facing right. If right is false, we're facing left. Then down here, where we are doing patrolling and we're figuring out which direction we're moving, in this case we're moving left, so we would say right equals false. And down here, we're facing to the right, so we'd say right equals true. So this way we're updating every frame if we're facing right or not. Then down here in our attack, before we add force, we'll go ahead and instantiate. Let's do a little check here. We'll say if right, so if we're facing right, then we are going to add a positive relative force. And if we're not facing right, so we can just do an else, that means we're facing left. We can copy this right here and paste it right here and change this to a negative web force. So now, if we're facing right, we throw to the right. If we're facing not right, so if we're facing left, then we'll throw with a negative force, which will make it move the other way. Let's test this out, and we should have this guy throwing axis in both directions. So I'm going to come over here and break that box, get it on my way. Okay, so when I get close enough, there we go. So now he's throwing axes at me. He's throwing it. He can't see me anymore. We got to make those axes disappear. But he sees me there. And if I go on this side of him, he'll throw it that way. So now we can throw it both ways. It looks a little weird because we don't have the axes actually being destroyed when they hit something. These axes do have a script on them. Let's see if we can look at that real quick. But the main problem of getting him to attack with a ranged attack from either direction and turning and facing and all that, we've got that all kind of fixed here now. So the axe script does have an on trigger. it's looking for a collision with a collider with on trigger enter 2D. So I don't have a trigger collider on my player currently, so that's why that's not giving it the damage and telling it to destroy itself. So we could also just do a some sort of a destroy if he hits anything on there, but for now, if I was to add a trigger collider to my player, so let's go over to the player here. You can have more than one collider. Right now I've just got this non-trigger capsule collider. I could also put a trigger collider. It would have to be a little bit bigger than my other ones because otherwise it won't ever get touched. But I could add a new collider just by going to add component, physics 2D. Let's do maybe another capsule collider. And this new capsule collider, let's turn the old one off. There we go. So I can see the new one. And the new one here, we're going to mark it as a trigger. We're going to make it a little bit bigger on the X and maybe a little bit bigger on the Y. Okay, so this is now a trigger collider. And if I turn the old collider back on, you'll see that that fits inside the other one. So this trigger will be entered by an object before it gets stopped by this other collider. So I can just save that, and that's marked as a trigger. My player has the player tag. The axe script is looking for something with the player tag, tell it to take some damage and to destroy the game object. We can give this axe some damage if we want to damage our player. But let's see now if the axes disappear when they hit the player. If they don't hit the player, they're going to just keep in the scene, so that would be something you'd clean up. But now when he throws it, it should be triggering that collider. Oh, okay. Alright, so we need to change this so that we're checking to see if the collider transform that we hit, if that's the player, then we're going to destroy the game object. So, try it again. And there. Alright, now, we don't have this set up to take damage right now, so we're getting that error when he hits, but now you can see the axe goes away when it hits our player. Okay, and you can do some cool things like add a little spin to that axe so it kind of spins as it goes through the air, things like that. But there we go. It was quite a bit to change this from the top-down version to the platform version. But again, the main idea was to make sure that when we are patrolling and moving that we are rotating ourselves to face the correct direction, either left or right, or keeping track of if we're facing left or right with a Boolean. And then we are making sure that we check to see if we're left or right when we add force to our projectile to make it go left or right. Hope that helped and made sense. Please leave comments if you have more questions. Have a great day and thanks for watching.